Hello there. So, if you're watching this channel, chances are you are thinking about or contemplating a move to the Florida area for your retirement or upcoming retirement. And so, in this video, what I want to discuss with you are some of the misconceptions that we see commonly from people who are thinking about retiring in Florida. And do stick around to the end because I'm going to go over my very most frustrating one that I hear time and time again. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Krista Tarrans. I'm a realtor here in Central Florida, and together with Mariana Wartella, we are your Florida 55 plus guide. But without further ado, let's jump right into these misconceptions. Misconception number one, your kids cannot live with you. Now, if you are moving to a 55 plus community, you may be thinking that everybody in that community has to be over the age of 55, and that is simply not true. There are communities where kids up to the age of 18 can live for 30 days, and we have seen some where kids can live up to 90 days. So if your grandchildren need to live with you for the summer, you'll want to research that first and find out which communities will allow that and which won't. And if we're talking about kids over the age of 19, some communities will allow them to live with you as long as they need to. So if they're your caregiver or something like that, as long as one person on the deed is over the age of 55, in many of these communities, it's actually possible to have that 19-year or older child living with you. Misconception number two, only the very wealthy can afford to live in a 55 and over community. Now, if you've been watching the videos that Mariana and I have put out, especially the ones where we go and visit communities, you have seen homes starting from the low 300,000s. Some are new construction, so the builders are offering incentives that buy down that interest rate so that your monthly payment can be greatly decreased. We have shown you duplexes. So those are they're usually called villas, but essentially it's a duplex where there's a shared wall. There's one house on this side and one house on this side that come with a lower price tag also. Now they may have a higher monthly fee, but in exchange for that, you have very, very little maintenance to take care of on your own. And if you don't want to break the bank, I think it is really important that you sit down and understand carefully the additional fee. So you have the HOA fee. Some may have a CDD, the community development fee. And you want to figure out what of those services you will be actually using and what you don't really care about to make sure that it is viable for you to move into a 55 and over community. Very often included in that HOA fee are things that you're going to be paying for no matter where you live. So for instance, internet or some basic cable television or lawn care. Sometimes even the outside of the home's maintenance is included or the roof. So those are things that are going to come up whether you're paying for them through the HOA or on your own. So it may not be making that big of an impact if you really sit down and do the math. You'll also want to grab a copy of the HOA's budget so you can see how the funds are being managed and make sure that it's something that you're comfortable with, that they are doing a good job with their budget and how they're using it. Misconception number three, that you're 55 or older, but you don't feel like you're old enough to be living in a 55 and over community. So if you are under the impression that 55 and over communities cater to the very elderly or the infirm, or that people aren't going to be active there, I can assure you that this is far from the truth. Of course, you will have, neighbors or people that you get to know who are on the older end, and watching that circle of life, watching them go into assisted living or things like that, yes, that can be a drag. But certainly not everybody in a 55 and over community is going to be in the higher end of that. There are plenty of people who live there who are still working. They may have spouses who are younger. And again, as I mentioned already, there are going to be some adult children living with them. So you will still have a mix of people living in these communities, just very few small children. At least they won't be there for the entire year. I think one positive way to look at transitioning to a 55 and over community is to see it as a place where you're going to find people who have common interests. So, you might like the same types of music or the same types of activities, the same kinds of TV shows. You're going to get the same references. It might just be a little bit easier to make friends. You're in the same stage of life. You're not taking kids to daycare and you're not worried about planning vacations around school holidays. That's all behind you. So I think it's just a great way to meet people that are going to share common interests with you. Misconception number 4, that there's going to be huge restrictions on having pets. Now, I hear this a lot from people that they say, I'd love to live in a 55 and over community, but I have 2 big dogs. But I hear this also from people who are just wanting to move into an HOA. So to set the record straight, there aren't really very many HOAs that really care about, the size of your pets. If you're moving into a single family home, condos, totally different story. But in a single family home, there really are not usually that many restrictions. There will definitely be restrictions on the number of pets you can have. So most counties are going to restrict that to, I think, 4, but that's something you'd have to check with the county on. So no 10 cats, but if you have a limited number of pets, you can usually get away with just about whatever breed you want. And with dogs, your homeowner's insurance may have a different say in that, but for the most part, they don't have a lot of say in what type of pet you have. And if you're thinking of something like having a chicken for fresh eggs, then this is probably not going to work out for you. There are generally restrictions on having those sorts of, farm type animals, but in terms of pets, it's not as strict as you would think it is. Now, if it is of a concern, you're going to want to grab those rules and regulations and read through them just to be sure. Giving a call to the HOA is not a bad idea if you have a concern about fencing. Most of these communities will allow you to have a fence. The lawn care people will need to have access to your backyard so that they can cut the grass, and they may restrict what type of fence you can have. So, for instance, some communities, especially if it's like golf front or if there's a lake in the back, they're going to want you to put up a wrought iron fence so that you're not blocking the view. But otherwise, generally speaking, fences are allowed. Misconception number 5, the HOA rules totally suck. So, this is a common thread throughout anybody thinking about moving to Florida, because so many of our, newer, nicer communities are HOA communities, and they do have rules. But for the most part, those rules are being set to keep the property values up. Yes, you sometimes have to get permission to paint your house, but that is because they want to keep a certain color palette going. So, I lived in a non-HOA community, and my neighbor painted his house turquoise, and he painted the inside of the house like bright orange. And when I drove home, I thought his house was on fire because the light coming through the windows made it look like there were flames shooting out the first day. If you don't want that, then an HOA is great. He would have been forced to paint it like beige or gray or something. But instead he painted it turquoise because there were no rules. So it's a double-edged sword, folks, let me tell you. So, you can't park a boat in your front yard. That's right. But do you want your neighbor to have an RV in their front yard? Maybe not. So just keep that in mind. The rules are usually there for a reason, and as long as you're following them, you don't have any issues. But if you know that you are not the sort of person who can deal with those kinds of rules, then this is not going to be for you. That's true. And finally, the biggest misconception, and the one that's the most frustrating to me, is when people say they want to live in a 55 and over community, but they don't want to have an HOA. So here's the problem. That doesn't exist. So a 55 and over community is restricting people on the basis of their age. So that means there are deed restrictions. And when you have a deed restricted community, you pretty much always have an HOA. They wouldn't be able to turn away people based on their age if there wasn't this set of rules, this deed restriction, and some sort of a body has to oversee it, and that becomes the HOA or the homeowners association. So if you are looking for this 55 and over community with no HOA, that does not exist. The only thing I can tell you is I do know of some 55 and over communities that lost their status as 55 and over. So they are no longer 55 and over strictly, but most of the people that live there are still 55 and over. If you can find that kind of a situation, then yes, you will have this non-HOA community where most of the people are 55 and over. Otherwise, it's not something you're going to find. So I hope that this video has been helpful for you. If you are interested in more information on 55 and over communities, I would suggest that you subscribe to our channel. Please feel free to send us an email. Here's our email address, or reach out to us by phone. And don't forget to join our Facebook page where you can ask questions to us directly. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.